when we started the Dean's Grand Rounds, it's been going on now for a year or so. At the time we started them, we always had 12 to 1 that was free, and so we were able to get quite a few students here. Unfortunately, with the curriculum becoming more and more complex, it's hard to get everybody in one place at one time, so I really appreciate your coming. I know pharmacology just finished their class, so we're expecting some more people from that class, but I really appreciate your attendance. We started the Dean's Grand Rounds primarily so that you could learn something beyond, do I need to know this with the USMLE? Something that's interesting and yet is important. And I think it's worked out really well. We've had a large number of great speakers. Today, you see the title of our presentation. Let me just say that how you view longevity is an interesting phenomenon. I was mentioning a while ago that I think it's this year, in a few months, I'm going to be celebrating my high school's 55th high school reunion. And try to imagine 50, that tells you kind of how old I am. But the last high school reunion I went to a few years ago, I looked at all these people and I went, who are you? I mean, you're so old. And then you're just like, who? I was just stunned. And now in retrospect, they were probably looking at me in the same way and saying, who are you? For instance, I've lost 5 inches in height and I was already short. So you can imagine what they thought when they saw me. On the other end of the spectrum, this summer, as most of you know, my sweetheart and I celebrated our 50th wedding celebration. So, 50th anniversary. And I'll have to tell you, it's been a wonderful summer to celebrate our 50th. But when I look at my wife, and I have to tell you, she was no doubt the most beautiful woman possible in the world when we married. I mean, she just overwhelmed me. And I look at her now, and she's more beautiful. She really, truly is more beautiful. So it's really kind of an interesting phenomenon when I look at my high school classmates and they've gotten old. And I look at my sweetheart and she's gotten more wonderful. So it's an interesting perspective of longevity. Today, Dr. Kotwal will give us some more insight into this interesting phenomenon. Dr. Kotwal.
Okay, thank you very much, Dr. Camacho. It's a pleasure to be giving this Dean's Grand Rounds in honor of the Deans at UMHS, and especially it happens to be on the eve of one of the special days of one of the Deans, and so we'll see what happens over the course of this half an hour. Okay, so the Dean's Grand Rounds is on the legacy and longevity of longevity of Madiba. So when I told some of the students that I've been talking about the legacy of longevity of Madiba, they said, "Who's Madiba?" Madiba is Nelson Mandela, and that was his tribal name, and that's what he was given. And when he went to school, he did not have an English name. And so he was asked what your name is, and he said, Mandela. They said, no, that's not an English name. So I'm giving you an English name, and that's how he got the name Nelson. He writes that in his book, The Long Walk to Freedom, which we all know was a very long walk. And since he was a walker for a long time, he lived long. So he has many legacies. I will stick to the legacy of longevity and not get into any of the politics in which he was involved. And so, and I've been looking and studying longevity for about 5 to 6 years now, ever since my father reached his age of 90, and then I started analyzing it and finding out a lot of insights from him as to how he managed to live that long, and he continues to live. And there are a lot of similarities in those who live long, and that enables us to say, okay, it's not that simple that you are doing something, one thing, and that's what's contributing to longevity. It's often multifactorial, which means a number of things are involved in longevity. So I call it the recipe for longevity, and that was the Dean's Grand Round I gave on August 2nd last year. And so it was basically went into a lot more detail. It was a lot more funny slides. This will be a little more serious since the subject of this Grand Rounds is in serious condition, is in critical condition but stable, and has been on life support and so on. But those who want to sort of get an idea, that's what we'll do. As I said, this Dean's Grand Round is in honor of the Dean, and it will soon be obvious why this particular day we are honoring him. Oh, he has a healthy appetite, and I don't say that he consumed all of those sandwiches. Those were meant for the hungry faculty. But yes, he has a healthy appetite. He always carries his crushed pepper along with him. So peppers are great, and so one needs to keep taking those peppers. So what have we learned from his life? I mean, I went through a lot more detail about what we learned from his life last year, but I'll briefly go through it. His is a very good low risk of lifestyle. He's a non-swimmer, so he's not going to get into any troubled waters anywhere. He's not a scuba diver, and so the chances of him being lost in the sea are very little. He's a non-smoker. That helps his lungs stay healthy. He's not a horse rider, but once he was put on a horse and he didn't know how to ride the horse basically took him for a ride. And so, and he never skydives, bungee jump. And so these are good components of longevity. And a low-risk lifestyle would always contribute to a person living longer. After all, the cat has 9 lives. I don't know how many lives humans have, but if you take too much risk, you are likely to not see that long length of life. So one of the key lessons of longevity that I would like you all to take, that there is no single ingredient or holy grail. It is a personalized mixture of ingredients, very similar to a sensational masala. Masala is a unique mixture of spices. So each one has to find their own masala. Okay, this is what is going to help me live long. So that is the key lesson. So it's not the yogurt that you're eating or that 5-mile walk that you're doing or anything else. It is a whole different complex issue, and I will try to break down that issue into what are the different possibilities in that case. So what is my hypothesis? Hypothesis is longevity is not dependent on a single factor. So no holy grail. So if you came to see that it is acai berry that gives you a long life, no, it doesn't happen. Unfortunately, there's not a single thing that contributes to long life. It is a marathon of survival and adaptation to changing environment and situations. So those who live in their 90s and 100s have several common distinctive features, and it's becoming very evident that there are certain common features. And there are no geographical boundaries for people living long. You could be in the tip of Africa, just like the subject of today's Dean's Grand Round, or it could be somewhere in Alaska. So it doesn't have to be a geographical location where you can say, although there are sort of longevity domains, like there are some Okinawa in Japan and all that, and I went through the details last year, but I will stick, because for the sake of time, I'll go quickly through that. And so there is no geographical boundaries, that's the message. And often what you do during your younger days, which is in what you do now, in terms of how you take care of your health, will reflect and will contribute to how long you will live in later life. And so that is something you always watch for in those who have lived long. How did they live when they were young? What did they do? What kind of sporting activities they were involved in? What kind of food they ate? And so on. And again, that will become obvious in the case we'll discuss. So life is just avoiding death, basically, and also, of course, enjoying it while doing that. But there are 1,000 ways one could die, and I don't want to go over that. You have already learned that in all of the subjects that you are learning. When we talk about parasitology today, we talked about the worms causing 20,000 deaths annually, and so on, and that's just one kind of worm. There are other, malaria causes millions of that. And so there are multiple ways that one could die. There's only one life to live, and therefore one has to fight to survive and have a strategy to survive a long life. So one may not live long, and if that's the case, that's fine. Some of us, we know we're not going to live long, and therefore I'm an admirer of those who are living long. And so make your life innovative and different. How do you make your life innovative? Look at the example of Steve Jobs. And so with all those iPads and innovative things, one can get to live long in memories of people by your actions. Anyway, what are the factors that influence longevity? Genetics. Having normal set of genes is important. As I said in the previous case, the only genetic defect that my father had was polydactyly, which is he had an extra finger, and it was removed with a horse's head. And in the case of Nelson Mandela, we have not found anything that says that he had any genetic defect. Of course, you should not be unlucky to have been in a natural disaster or in man-made disasters, and so that also influences longevity. Avoiding infectious diseases, communicable diseases is also a critical part of longevity. And over the years there have been vaccines. Again, the subjects that we are talking about, those are already in their 90s, did not have that, and some of them did happen to die from some of the infectious diseases. So millions of people have died up to the end of last century because of infectious diseases, and that was a major cause of death from the beginning of the dawn of civilization. Then, of course, is to avoid a lot of different diseases like the cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, and other fatal and non-fatal accidents. Of course, another big factor influencing longevity is mental health. Having good mental health is key to living long, because you have to have a purpose in life and a motivation to live long, or at least to live a healthy, long life, and that includes a whole lot of things to make sure that there is. So in terms of genetics, being born without any inborn defects or having distinct bad genes is a plus. So that is something that can be a good start to a long life. But if there are SNPs, single nucleotide polymorphisms, allelic differences, and other things that could affect later stages in life, now it is easier to get your DNA sequence and also look for the single nucleotide polymorphisms that can prevent future problems. So no exposure to carcinogens, mutagens during lifetime would always be helpful. There was a study that showed there's a cluster of longevity genes, but somehow that didn't hold up, and so it may not be true that there's a cluster of longevity genes. Gene expression and influence of drugs and intake of supplements can also be a useful tool to determine longevity. And pharmacogenomics coming in has also contributed to preventing the wrong pharmaceuticals from being accepted and administered based on the understanding of the genes. So good physical health, once you are born, you have without gene defects. Next thing is to have good physical health. Nutrition is key part of good physical health. Physical activity, it's like medicine. It is necessary, and those who have lived long you will see, have had a lot of physical activity throughout their lifetime, but especially during their youth when their bodies are developing. Hygiene and habits, of course we have gone through that. A non-smoker and a moderate drinker will likely to live long. Regular checkups, pretty much important. Nipping ailments in the bud, very important. Avoiding accidental physical injury, another important thing. And of course, infection control, making sure your vaccinations are done on time would be very useful. Good mental health. Again, there's a common thread that binds these persons who live long. And when I say persons that live long, which is, you can consider the dean as in the infancy of longevity. He's just an infant who has a long way to go to reach those, catch up with long living people. So you'll find that companionship, he already mentioned his wife of 50 years, friendships, family support, all of those are key in having good mental health, good social interactions, helping others and social network. Of course, security, being financially stable also helps. Again, these guys are all had good retirements. Of course, the person in the subject of today's discussion has excellent support and unlimited support to ensure that he stays healthy. Mental activity, constant mental activity throughout life, having a purpose in life, recreation activity on regular basis, ability to deal with diversity. Now here we are going to talk about a subject who went through such an enormous amount of adversity all his life. And on top of that, he comes out of that adversity, and then he's told your wife of 30 odd years or 40 years has to be ditched to get another wife. So this party tells him, okay, this is fine. If you want to survive as a politician and become president, you need to ditch your wife. So that is the level of adversity this particular person has gone through. Inner strength. People must have inner strength. And again, all of these are stubborn, strong people who have lived long. They have a sense of being righteous, and they are principled, and they have a lot of inner strength. They have good memory and retention, at least for some of the things, retaining facts and retaining a lot of information. And that is another ability of some of these. Rest. Finally, we will talk about rest. You want to live, there was an article that said, want to live to 100? Simple answer, sleep. Easy to tell you sleep, but you know it's not that easy. Sleep at night, my father always said, early to bed and early to rise, and get good rest. A lot of them also, of course, will have afternoon naps. This is about the time that they would be having a nap if they are not in or even if they are in a seminar. Insomnia will shorten life. Sleep medications are, of course, addictive. So with that, we move on to the case of the longevity of Madiba. And he just turned 95 on July 18, 2013. And is still living, and so it is a living legacy. Amongst the many legacies he's had, this is a major legacy that a person might like me interested in longevity can determine. So this is basically the best description of his boyhood. I couldn't find too much other information on him, and basically what he says is he was free to run in the fields. So he was a long distance runner. The next village was far away, so he ran a lot, he swam a lot of physical activity. He loved food, and he developed his appetite for food from there. And it was roasted mealies, which is corn, that he had. So it was only when he learned that the freedom that he had was an illusion that he became hungry for freedom. So this is one of the earlier pictures, because he was a son of a tribal chief, and also he was going to inherit the role of the tribal chief. And so he came from the Kosa community, or Kosa tribe, which is a fairly large one. It is spelled X-H-O-S-A, and it's quite a pleasure to listen to the language. You want to understand it, because there are a lot of clicks that go with the language. And so first time I heard, I said, what are they making fun of me or something? They were going, for punctuations and so on, and I couldn't quite understand, was there something wrong with this? But it's just the way the language is. Okay, and if he needed a doctor during his time, because he was amongst the tribe, he would be going to the traditional healers, the Sangomas. The Sangomas form almost 30,000 sort of the traditional healers in South Africa. So those are the next line. If you're not in the city, you probably go to a Sangoma. And the Sangoma will then pull up herbs from the shelf. He moved on from that tradition he moved to the city and wanted to get a law degree at Witwatersrand in Africa. And from then you see that he was always well dressed and very particular. That's a trait that you'll find amongst those living long, that they always want to be well dressed and well kept and so on. So physical activity of Madiba. So as we said, he was physically very fit, a long distance runner, a lover of boxing, and did that even on the rooftop of the prison he was in. As far as his social and family life was concerned, he had 3 marriages, 2 of which he had a total of about 4 to 6 sons and daughters, and they had several other. So he had great grandkids and so on. So it's a fairly large family, and that's again a trait where if you don't have someone to constantly be with you, because when you live that long, you lose your friends. So what do you have is this blood relatives as well as the friends who still manage to survive. This is where he spent 27 years. That's the Robben Island that goes across from Cape Town. You can see the main city, which is also the southwesternmost tip of Africa. And from his prison cell, he could see the lights and all that. In between is cold water, and so it's a very harsh conditions are there. So his prison cell, as you can gather, was very small, and his let's see how his prison life was. This was a quarry. It looks okay, except that they made the prisoners chip the rocks from the quarry, and each one had to sit from morning to evening chopping at those rocks. Extreme physical activity, but repetitive motion and so on. He of course developed good friends. And did I say that somebody asked him to ditch his second wife? It was his closest friend that he developed friendship with, who could communicate with him on a fairly mentee relationship, and that was Walter Sisulu. So he developed a lot of friendship in there, and they could interact and socialize. Later on, he showed what exactly he was doing, basically taking a hammer and a nail and chipping off at the stone. And then occasionally they would play games. And at least he could read. He sent a lot of letters to his wife. Unfortunately, the prison guards were sometimes deceptive, and they would hold on to letters and wouldn't send that. So he realized that, and that was another psychological pressure. So what was the diet of Madiba? So earlier on, his diet was boiled maize, in the prison cell, he ate porridge and for breakfast, and boiled maize for lunch, and again porridge, and so for supper, and so it wasn't a very balanced meal. And not only that, they further discriminated against the prisoners based on their race. So a person who was either Asian or Malay would get a slightly different meal than the Bantus. Bantus is the name that they use for all of the 300 to 600 African tribes. And basically, as you can see, and this will be one of the problems that the biochemistry students for nutrition will solve, is how much calories did he get? Okay, milli meal, breakfast 6 ounce, and then supper 6 ounce, and then they had fat per person, then millies, which is the corn, and then meat, which could be bone, fat, and everything, and no jam, syrup. As I said, they discriminated. The Malay and the Asians got 2 ounces. The Bantu got 1.5 ounces. And so that was sort of another cruel way of discriminating, not based on the size of a person or the needs of a person, but on the basis of their race, that they were given different foods. And then coffee was given for breakfast. This is how the millie corn meal flour looks like, and that was something that was given to them. So of course, sitting there with the same meal of porridge and maize every day and every hour for 27 years, or at least the time he was in the prison, he longed for his traditional food. And one of them, it was a healthy traditional food called amasi, which is the South African fermented milk. It is thick and sour, and it is like a curd, which is rich in calcium, has all the necessary ingredients. And of course, he also made it clear that he had a healthy appetite. So that is a common thread amongst these, the long living, is a healthy appetite. And that's why I brought those sandwiches in front of the dean at the beginning. So they all have this common thread. They have a healthy appetite for food. They long for good food. So this is how amasi basically looks like. It's fermented milk, and it's the way to do that is you transfer the culture from one amasi to another fresh milk, and then 24 hours overnight it will turn into amasi. Then that amasi is what he had. So he was longing for the simple things which he didn't get, and these were kind of impacted his later life. This also causes decline in E. coli in fermented dairy, so amasi has a probiotic effect too. Now he's free, so his life was presumably much more better, and he got all kinds of honors. Became president of South Africa. He got the Nobel Prize and became one of the 10 Nobel laureates of South Africa. So for a small country of about 42 million, that's quite a large number of Nobel laureates. Some of them got Nobel Prizes for doing molecular work on the roundworm. We talked about this in microbiology. Some of them got for CT scan, was the Nobel Prize. The theory for the CT scan came from McCormick. So the modern medicine also was well developed in South Africa. The first heart transplant took place, and so he was definitely getting that kind of treatment even during the prison, although he did get tuberculosis, and we'll go over that. So of course 20 years he had to make up for the food. He hired his own chef who made his favorite dishes, and one of them was the oxtail stew was his favorite dish. And of course South Africa is a rainbow nation with Malays, with Africans, with the Indians, and so each of them provided him with different dishes, and that's how he was doing well. And of course he wanted to promote his country, so he also started this presidential shirt. So there are presidential shirts that are part of the Mandela presidential shirt collection. There are about 500 different designs, and they are all labeled proudly South African, and this is something, again, something that the longer living people have a flair for is good clothes, and unlike the other guy who's in the neighborhood who is not moving out of power and wearing suits made in the former colonial powers, he made typically African shirts with designs that were fairly local. So that's the different collection. So that is always, since leaving that, he was no longer having the prison clothes, but wearing all these nice clothes. So what was the impact of the 27 years in prison? He was missing vegetables. If you looked at that carefully, there were no vegetables. It was just a lot of carbs, maybe some fiber through the cornmeal and so on, fat and meats, but no vegetables. And one of the things that he was missing that could have impacted his future health were tomatoes. He did not get any tomatoes or watermelons, other fruits that would have given him the antioxidants and the other and the lycopenes and all of the nice nutraceuticals that could have been given. So what was wrong with the prison life? Excessive physical activity, repetitive motion, too much stress, calorie restriction, didn't get the right calories to go with that, lack of a balanced diet, especially no veggies and antioxidants, and exposure to elements of nature, hot summers and cold winters, and dust from the quarry. All of those were physically too much, and they resulted